As the hitting intensifies, it's 1-0 Montreal. On a power play for another 50 seconds. Richards trying to scoot in there alone. Halak way out of the net. It pinballs to the crease. Score! Mike Richards!
The Flyer captain is announcing his presence as the alpha male early in this one. Big hit. Sets up that cranker from Coburn, the defenseman joining the attack. They win a puck deep in their own zone. Hammerlick and the goaltender Halak collide. Oh, did they ever. And it's a tap in for Richards.
Everybody, it's Isaiah, just reminding you that FlyersNittyGritty.com and the O&B Puckcast are brought to you by Summit Public Adjusters. Hey, do you have damage to your home? Not sure who to call? We suggest that you call Summit Public Adjusters before your insurance company. Dealing with your insurance company can be very stressful. Let Summit take the stress out of the claims process. From storm damage to your roof, to toilet overflows, to broken pipes and fires, Summit gets you the most money for your repairs. So next time Mother Nature leaves you in need of repairs, call Summit Public Adjusters at 215-752-0560 or visit summitpublicadjusters.com. Licensed in PA and New Jersey.
Hey everybody, it's Isaiah. We are back, and we have a special show tonight. The Flyers have been busy once again since our last broadcast, and we're going to talk about that. Let's first introduce our panel very briefly. Chef, how are you, man?
Very good. Thank you very much.
Great. And, of course, we're here also with the great Dan Silver.
Hey, guys. It's been a good weekend so far.
Yeah, definitely. And with us again, to kind of bracket what we talked about, it's about 5 weeks ago or so from the Flyers Broadcast Network. You know him also from 97.5, The Fanatic, and his name is Jason Myrtetus.
What's going on?
How you doing, Jace? How you doing?
I'm good, man. I'm looking at my countdown app. 74 days until the Flyers drop the puck on the 21-22 season, October 15th.
Oh, yeah. You got training camp and all that. And, you know, Jace, last time we spoke, we talked about some of the things that had to happen on the ice, off the ice, and like how much of a cleaver was Chuck Fletcher going to take to this team. I'll tell you, he really took it. We got 6 new Flyers that should be in the lineup on a somewhat regular basis. What's your overall impressions before we kind of break it down, each individual move?
Well, I think you termed it right. Yeah, I mean, he broke out. He was surgical, but he broke out the cleaver because he lopped off some pieces that a lot of us thought would be very difficult to lop off. It would take kind of the perfect scenario to lop them off. Like Voracek was a big one. Like you looked at that and said, well, that's got to be a Seattle with a pretty significant sweetener, right? And it just didn't play out that way. So for him to kind of do what he did, and the reason why I say he was surgical, because I think a lot of this work on what he accomplished was set in motion during the season. Mm-hmm. And I think the Ryan Ellis one clearly was. I think Ristolainen was also one that you go back into the season in conversations that were had back then and then revisited, resparked, or whatever. And there's probably a few of those conversations that we're staging for this offseason that didn't happen, whether that's, maybe Tarasenko or some other players that we don't even know about. So I think that I think that he identified the areas of his team and the areas that he thought he could accomplish this offseason, and I think he came up with solutions for all of them. Are they right solutions? Well, we'll find that out in time. But no, I think that all the areas that he thought he could check off in one offseason, I think that he did. There's a couple of the moves that are a little bit, a little bit more of a head scratcher for me, and we'll kind of get into those as we go. But I think he had a really good offseason. A lot of people, Chuck got made fun of. It doesn't know how to operate a computer, sleepy Chuck, all those things. But he's a smart hockey guy. I mean, he grew up around the game. His father's a Hall of Famer, and he's an educated man. And I think he had a plan, and you never want to make moves just to make moves on a fan's timeline. You got to wait them out and do it properly. I always go back to Joe Sakic and the moves that he made, in trading some pretty significant players, Matt Duchene, right?
Right.
And he waited that out in the way he waited it out. And, fans were thinking that he was never going to move the guy or get any value for him. And then what he ended up getting in return was insane. So you look at some of those moves through the years, and you got to do it on the organic timeline of being able to make the move, not to pacify a fan base. When who was it that Graves got traded to New Jersey, and people were freaking out, going, "Oh, Flyers could use that guy." Well, this is before the expansion draft. It made no sense for them to trade for Ryan Graves at that time because you had a protection issue already, and he got traded because he couldn't be protected because they thought Seattle was going to take him. So there was no sense in trading for yet another left shot and in a situation where you couldn't protect him. And I think that was just people being impatient. And I get the impatience. Like, it's time to shit or get off the pot here. Let's go. And, Chuck took a big healthy dump and got a lot done. Pardon the pun.
That's one way to put it. I do think back to Sakic, and he was kind of on the ropes, and his reputation was really flagging. And when he made that Duchene trade, he got Samuel Girard and that big package you're talking about. That kind of flipped the switch on Colorado becoming a real cup contender, moving toward that, that arc of contention.
Yeah, I mean, he really waited it out. People were saying, you're not going to get value, you're waiting too long, you're being too greedy in your ask. And eventually, he got a haul, man. So, comparison, I guess the only reason I bring it up is because a lot of times as observers, fans, people who cover the game or watch the game and enjoy the game, we want things to happen in light speed, but they very rarely do when you're trying to consummate complicated trades with players, with cap hits and contracts that are very high in a flat cap world. Yeah,
absolutely. I do want to go over each transaction of every major player. But, Chef, if you have a question aside from that, why don't you get that in there?
Oh, okay. Yeah, sure. Last time you were on, we talked about a couple of things, and I'll bring up two things. We were talking about all the trades that should or could happen, and we talked about how many we thought were going to happen. And, I remember bringing up a ridiculous amount of trades saying 5 forwards, 2 defensemen, and a backup goalie. And we're like, oh, yeah, that would be a lot. We don't think it would be that much. Well, then Chuck basically gave us the middle finger and said, I'm going to move almost everybody. And then you talked about just now all the trades, and that alludes to something you talked about earlier, too. Operational currency, of the trades, like all these trades that happened. Are you surprised by any of them? I mean, I know they had to go in a certain order because, what operational currency was before the NHL draft or, before, the NHL draft and and even now starting free agency and all that's got to be some of the, decisions that weighed into Chuck's mind and how crafty he was to get some of it done.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at it, things have to go in a certain order, and there's flow charts based on, okay, if we trade for Ryan Ellis, what do we do next? If we don't get Ellis, what's the other target, and what's the trickle-down effect of that, right? Every move's got a different path, and as you make them, and I'm not naive enough to think that every one of these moves was the number one choice move. We don't know. I mean, they were in on Seth Jones. That didn't work out. Turns out in hindsight, based on the ticket that he got and the contract he signed, that's a good thing. But with that being said, things worked out this way, but they have to go in an order because sometimes you don't know other trades you're going to need to make based on what you gave up in a trade that hasn't happened yet. Like Ryan Ellis, part of that deal is Nolan Patrick and Phil Myers. Now you have a second pair hole on D for a right side defender. and you also have a 3C opening. So how do you work this situation? You got to assess what you have, what solutions you may have in-house, either at the exact position or a trickle-down effect to determine how you fill the voids. So you go, okay, well, maybe Morgan Frost is your third-line center. So now we got to grab a bottom, a fourth-line center, penalty killer, all of those things. And you go, okay, we lost the second pair of defense. We got to find somebody that can play the right side, can play with Sandhun, can play pretty heavy minutes, but also kind of checks one of these other boxes that we want to check. You looked at Myers, you go, he's a big guy, he's a big body, but he wasn't a mean player. So you look at, that's why you go to Rustalainen and you go, okay, that's a box we needed to check. We needed toughness. So they filled that created void with him. And even though he's in the last year of a deal, I'm not under any delusions that they're not going to try and re-sign him because, you can't have conversations before. But I think by noon on free agency day, we know that all these people talk and they tamper. How do they come to these complicated deals so quickly on free agency day when they weren't allowed to talk prior? There's back channel communications. It happens in all sports. So, there's a lot of things and different, branches of the tree based on what happens and when it happens that determine what happens next.
Yeah. Why don't we start with Ryan Ellis and going into the hunt for this defenseman? One of the things I really liked about him is he was the most like Matt Niskanen in a lot of ways, and he had a very calm game. Because I remember your last appearance, you really liked the way Niskanen could come in and kind of slow down the momentum of the other team with that so-called quiet shift. Yeah. And out of all the defensemen, and you look at the skill sets, the level of experience, I just felt like Ryan Ellis, in spite of some of the negatives that he had in terms of durability or lack of size, it just seemed like a really good fit. And he came at a pretty good number, even with the term, the AAV, let the Flyers do some things they might not have been able to do, like you were referring to with Seth Jones.
Yeah, I mean, Jones's first year, you'd have been in a good spot because of the 5.4 in the last year of his deal. But, I mean, basically you have the player under contract now for 9 years and at a huge number. So you kind of divide his entire contract this year left and the others, and you come up with like 9.2. But, yeah, with Ryan Ellis, he's a guy, we were all in the season hearing about Mattias Ekholm. And the 1 year left was a hang up, and he was a left shot but could play some right side. So at that time I was kind of terming him as a fit, but not a perfect fit because he wasn't a right shot. We know how much, coaching values the right side, right shot, and all that stuff. So that was part of it. But with Ellis, too, I think as the season wound down and Chuck, from kind of the trade deadline on, and he mentioned it, I'm going to use this period of time to identify who's part of the solution and who's not. Not really necessarily part of the problem, although that can be you can derive that based on what he said. I think some guys weren't a part of the problem, but they weren't the solution, like Jake and some other guys. So I think that he really valued bringing in a lot of different character elements to the team. And I had heard back in March that Ellis was indeed the target. If initially it probably was Ekholm, but it quickly became Ellis back in March. And I know there was a lot of conversations back then. And to me, by the moves that he made this offseason, by having guys that are really, they're gamers. Ellis is a gamer, Ristolainen's a gamer, Cam Atkinson. These are guys that bring a lot of character. And I think he wanted to bring a lot of that character into the room because he knows he's got some young players that are impressionable. So I think bringing in those guys in not only helps you now, it changes the dynamic of your room, but it also helps those young players learn to be a pro from guys that are high character, high motor, guys that want to win. So everybody says they want to win, but it's what you do and what you sacrifice to win that really tells the story. So I think that was part of the equation as well with Ellis and a lot of the acquisitions.
Yeah, definitely. Dan?
So, hey, Jace, thanks again for joining us, man. It's awesome to have you on.
No problem.
So, to kind of piggyback on what you were just talking about, obviously Chuck, saw the need to kind of bring in some more vets, some older guys to help out in the room and on the ice. So, and it's a bunch of guys. I mean, and they've got different personalities. I mean, Keith Yandel's sort of like Kevin Hayes. I mean, we think about Kevin Hayes as being a guy that talks a lot of smack, and you watch videos with Hayes and Yandel, and Hayes can't even get a word in. So it's like, man, Yandel sure likes to talk. So you've got, Yandel, Ellis, Atkinson. How does that, and again, I love all the moves. I think it's great. Is there, when you add those guys to a room with Giroux and Couturier, and I guess more Giroux, but maybe Couturier, and the room better than us, is there any risk of sort of like too many of those kind of guys and sort of like Giroux, like not really knowing what he's supposed to do and what he's supposed to say? Or what do you think, like adding that many guys, what does the vibe in the room kind of turn into?
Yeah, it's a good question, Dan. And I don't think we know yet. The personality of a team, you don't even figure out until you're 20 games into a season, kind of how the guys get along. You saw when Hayes first got here. I mean, he came in and he just fit in. He was having a blast. He was having fun and all of those elements. How the pieces fit together, that'll remain to be seen. We just don't know that dynamic until you put those guys in a situation. And the thing that you hope is that, the ultimate elixir in sports is winning. That's always more fun. So if they're winning and they have the change, it'll go great. But if they make all these changes and they're not winning, then you could start to get into some situations. But while they're all big, high-character guys, they're far different. Like Ryan Ellis is very reserved. Atkinson is very outgoing and, always in a good mood. Yandel's a ball breaker like Hayes is. They're constantly chirping each other and having fun. But what that does for a guy like Giroux and Couturier, though, Dan, I'll tell you this. Like, they loved the addition of Hayes, and now you almost times two it, because those guys take up so much air in a room that you don't feel like you got to be one of those guys constantly yipping. And those guys aren't like, they're not high-level talkers off the ice like Hayes and like Yandel are. So those guys take care of all that. And it almost takes a pressure off. I don't know if the right word is shy players, but more shy players, And Giroux's not shy, and Couturier's not shy, but they're players that, aren't the loudest guy in the hallway. Hayes is. Yandel will be. And they'll constantly be keeping it loose and breaking balls. And it's good for those guys because they kind of just sit on the outside and laugh at it. And they get some shots in here and there. But they don't have to lead the way when it comes to hijinks and tomfoolery. So I think that part helps. But how they all fit together remains to be seen because they are all different personalities, and you're throwing a lot of different ingredients into this big bowl of soup now. But we have no idea. The ingredients on their own are good, but does the soup do they complement each other, and does the soup taste good? That's going to be the ultimate test. And while we can like these moves on paper, and some people like some of them to varying degrees and don't like any or like them all, the ultimate telltale sign is going to be what happens on the 200 by 85 once they start playing. In Philadelphia sports, we've had to have learned by now. I don't think we have, but as a fan base, that we can only go so far as to what things look like on paper because we've been burned 1,000 times. Things look great on paper, but that doesn't mean shit until you put it into play and you get the results on the ice. So to assume that Ryan Ellis is going to be what Matt Niskanen was, he's a better player, but is he going to fit the same way? Is he going to buy into the role? Is the chemistry going to be the same as it was with Burrow? They all remain to be seen because you can't know the answers to those questions without seeing it.
No, I can hear. Oh God, what's his name? Vince, the quarterback from Texas, came
Vince
in.
Young.
Vince Young, Dream Team. And
Dream
he starts
Team.
yucking it up, and what a disaster that was. But you're right, exactly, the chemistry. But we know the chemistry last year, as Chuck Fletcher referred to, was the locker room was dead. There was a, quote, a malaise in the room. There wasn't energy. I mean, a lot of this is Chuck thinking about the culture, the intangible stuff we talked about last time. There had to be an improvement. So when the Flyers ship out Shane Gostisbehere with a second and a seventh-round pick, it's strictly to open up cap space. And if I recall correctly, their next move is for Rasmus Ristolainen, which is probably the biggest and most controversial move for the 13th overall, the second, and Robert Haig. It's not that people missed Robert Haig, but it's people looking at some stat sheet numbers with Rasmus Ristolainen. But he brings a lot of intangibles. He brings an incredible tool set, skill package, nastiness, and a lot of stuff the Flyers don't have. And he also, with a guy like Ryan Ellis, who's going to miss 10, 12 games a year on average, right? They're going to need somebody who can step in and maybe spot on the first pair sometimes. And I think the fact that both the pro and the amateur scouts and the Flyers organization have loved this player so long went into them taking that chance with this player.
Yeah, I mean, and look, the analytics on them, I've seen them. I've looked at them, and are they concerning? Absolutely. But I think that you guys know how I feel about analytics. I think they're a tool, but they're not. They can't be a religion. And I think the things that he does bring to the table, and I think that the one thing that people really need to consider is where he was playing. I mean, he is not the first player to come out of Buffalo and, hockey hell right now, unfortunately. Their fan base is great, but it's hockey hell. I mean, was Ryan O'Reilly a loser and all those things when he was there? No. Look at Taylor Hall went there last year. He had 2 goals in Buffalo.
Yeah. And
then all of a sudden he goes to Boston, he can play. Everybody leaves there and they can play. I mean, I don't know if Skinner's going to leave there and be able to do anything. He might be gassed, but, I mean, look at all the different guys that have come through and left and flourished. And his role was he was improperly used there as a number 1 guy at 19 years old. And he's not that guy. But in my conversation with him last week, he's funny. He's goofy. He's got that kind of Finnish goof to him,
Yeah.
Which is so anti kind of Kimmo Timonen, and he's a bit of a meathead, right? Workout guy. I chuck weights, and he said, I want to be a piece of shit out there.
Yeah.
I just can't imagine what a guy like him would be like in a 7-game series, right?
Yeah.
Well, he's more of a playoff player. It was like he's never had the chance to have the whistle swallowed a little bit with him around,
Oh yeah, I mean, I think he can just wear down opponents, and I just think he's a guy that can really bring them an element that they guys. When Lindblom and Farabee dropped the gloves last year, like that was it for me. It's I know the game's not about fighting anymore, and he's not a fighter. Ristolainen's not a fighter, but you need some accountability on the ice, and it just wasn't there. I mean, it's like the Flyers, because of the Broad Street bully era, and everybody saying, "Oh, that kind of hockey's over. You got to move on. You got to move forward." Well, they grabbed the steering wheel and overcorrected. You know what I mean? And they went too far to the other side of the highway. Mm-hmm. They got so far away from physicality and fighting that they can't even throw a hit. So I think they overcorrected, and you got to correct back a little bit, because I think one thing that we've seen in the playoffs, and if you watch that Tampa Bay Florida series, I mean, that was vicious, right?
Yeah.
You got to be able to have physicality and accountability and all of that stuff out there. It's all going to be. I think that just adds something. And I talked to a lot of players. I talked to Danny Briere the night of the draft out at Flyers Skate Zone, and I said, "What does a guy like that do for you on the ice?" He's like, "Oh my God, dude, it makes a ton of difference." Because I'm in front of the net getting my ass handed to me. I'm getting crushed. And I looked out at our end, and the guys are sitting up there pulling up a beach chair. Like, first of all, that's deflating as a player. But just playing against a guy like that, you're just kind of you always know, you're like, God damn it, he's on the ice again. It's a pain in the ass.
Yeah.
You're just like, are you shitting me? This guy's I'm on the ice again, and this prick's out here again, right?
Yeah.
When those guys are on the ice. And I just think, there's no stat or analytics for fear. And I'll read you guys this quote. I don't know if you heard me read it before. I won't say who it's from, but because he asked me not to. But I was talking to him about guys like that, and he said hockey's simple till you over-evaluate it. There's no analytics for fear when you're on the ice, because you can have all the skills in the world, but they get easily taken away with fear. Tough teams have more rooms to make plays. And he said, makes sense. Don't quote me on this. Ha ha. And I'll just tell you that the player is really good.
Yeah.
He's a really highly skilled player. And that's true. Those things do get minimized, and, you have to have an awareness when you're on the ice, and those things, those kind of players are out there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, Ristolainen, he was a pain in our ass this past season. He was hard to play against. It seemed like he was always he was like bullying the Flyers every time he was out there, especially when I do remember like 2 or 3 times where he pinched in, and it might have been the game that they broke their streak on, where he pinched in, and basically that was the end for the Flyers that game, because everywhere he was, people were shunning away from contact with him.
Yeah. Well, the other thing too, I like Charlie O'Connor, but I mean, to bring up the Andrew McDonald thing, Andrew McDonald never had 4 straight seasons with over 40 points. And people go, well, he got all that on the power play. And I said, okay, well, what's the big deal? He was on the power play. You're going to, the guy's Andrew McDonald, but the only difference is he got on the power play. He got on the power play because he's a better player. And he had a bigger shot. He had more offensive upside. Why hold that against him? So I just think it's those outlandish statements of comparing him to Andrew McDonald when there's no comparison is where I get irritated. But, I mean, it is what it is. I mean, I think a large portion of the fan base here are going to love him because of his physicality. A large part that hates him is going to like him because they're going to realize that element does matter. And then there's a part of the analytics community that's just going to shit on him no matter what. Because, it's funny because the analytics community hated a lot of the Flyers' moves. But then the one wins above replacement model came out and had the Flyers winning the division.
Jay Fresh. Yeah, I was going to talk about that.
I was laughing my bag off when I saw it. I'm like, isn't that the conundrum for an analytics guy?
Yeah, his war model from Jay Fresh. Check him out on Twitter. Had the Flyers tied with the Rangers, so go figure. Well,
the other thing, too, real quick, when I was at the practice facility that night of the draft, I was talking to Chuck just when we were down grabbing something to eat, and I mentioned, the people were upset because you gave up the 13th pick, and he said, the only reason we got him is because we had 13. 7 teams offered them a first-round pick. The Flyers were the team with the highest first-round pick to offer, and that's why they got him.
Yeah. If we have Corsi, we have Fenwick. Maybe we can come up with Fearwick. That should be the new analytic for that. Dan, you go ahead.
Yeah, no, just on Ristolainen, Jason's interviews with the new guys were really great the last few weeks. The Ristolainen one was phenomenal. He really just sort of he comes off, and I don't know if it's the language barrier or what, but he just sort of comes off as like a meathead, almost like an Ivan Drago type, like I will crush you. I just gotta ask you, were you getting you do this, you go to the box 2 minutes. It's you cannot do this.
Yeah, it's very simplistic, and there's almost a childhood naivete to him. You know what I mean? The thing is with him too, Danny, is he's so funny and he's so intimidating looking. The most was he just kept repeating it. I'll do whatever it takes for my team. I don't care what role I'm in. It's not about me at all. It's about what I can do to help us win. This guy wants to win, right? And I think he's going to end up being a great teammate based on the things that he said as well. He may not be an analytics darling, he never will be, right? And he may not, be what people thought he was going to be as an 8th overall pick. But I think he's a guy that every player on that team is going to appreciate his presence because it's going to mean they all got 2 inches bigger and 15 pounds stronger.
Yeah, I mean, you can just imagine opening night, they're playing against the Canucks or whatever at the Wells Fargo, and Ristolainen just destroys someone, right? He just lines up Elias Pettersson or whoever. And I mean, Flyers fans are just going to fall in love with him. You know what I mean? And the Twitter analytics guys will continue, bashing him. But he seems like a guy that outside of a first pair role, can, and on a team that's going to be more competitive, can just kind of, do his thing. And he does that. I mean, the McDonald comparison is ridiculous because he just does have so much skill. I mean, you've seen the guy score ridiculous goals. He just doesn't have that high of a hockey IQ, but,
Yep. Yeah, and he's a free. And look, it didn't. I mean, Phil Myers, the reason why was moved is because of his hockey IQ. He's a freak athlete, right? Skates like a gazelle at that size, the whole thing. But then, simple play. I remember in one of the games this year, it might have been against the Rangers. I mean, he got caught at his own blue line trying to defend the blue line outside the dots by the door to the bench twice and just got matador to the inside. It's you don't give up the inside of the ice on that spot, especially when you're the last guy back. Yeah. And he just did it repeatedly. And that'll drive you nuts. It's guys, you've been hearing this since Pee Wee. Inside the dots. We want to keep everything to the outside. We don't want to give them the inside, and he's inviting them. Like it was. I think I blew a gasket one of those nights when he did it twice in one game on the post game show. We were playing the highlight. I'm like, you just can't give up the middle of the ice. Like this isn't complicated, super sophisticated hockey, strategy. Just force everything to the outside, and it just kept happening.
Especially with his recovery speed, where he can take advantage of it.
Oh yeah, I mean, he can string a guy to the outside all the way to the goal line, and that's what you want to do. Yeah, you guys want to go to the outside? Have fun. Stay out there all you want. No problem. Shoot from out there too. Even better. No problem at all. It's what they did kind of against Montreal. String them out. It was like there was no danger when the player and the puck's always out there. Like you'll take that all day. You just go, okay, fine, stay out there. You're not going to score, so it doesn't really matter unless you get the puck to the house. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, just before we move on and talk about the shocking trade that pleased so many fans with Cam Atkinson coming to Philly. A word about Nolan Patrick. Now, I saw him get interviewed on, I think it was the NHL Network or something. They were showing something locally in Vegas. I hadn't seen that kid smile so wide. I don't think when he was here in Philadelphia. So something's going on here. And you were saying in the last show, like, did it look like he wanted to be here? No. Yeah. Sure looks like he wanted to get out of town.
Yeah. I don't think I ever really saw that smile the whole time he was here. I don't know what it was. It just didn't mesh, I guess. I never thought there was much personality there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I mean, I think the first time I interviewed him, I think it was during a regular season game, and it was in between periods, and he came in, and I thought he was going to fall asleep on the blade of a stick, standing there. And I got done the interview. I mean, he gave me less than nothing, and I'm there just trying to do a job. I know some guys want to talk, some guys don't. I get it. And he walked out of the room, and I just looked at the PR guy, and he goes, "I'll talk to him." I mean, it was like, what are we doing here? You know what I mean? Like, come on. I think I cracked the code in one interview I did with him, and that was this past year, where I got him to loosen up a little bit. And like, I'm around these guys all the time. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, a lot of them like trust me and know that I'm not going to like take their quote and put it out without context or anything. And I just couldn't get him. It was the same thing with Mike Richards and Jeff Carter on the air, but off the air they were great. But Patty was just always really to himself.
A market, you think it could be this whole area, this type of market that he's in, it's too big for him and he needs to go somewhere else where it's a little cooler down?
I mean, you're going to Vegas, you're going to have a lot of eyes on you there, I don't know. I don't know what it was. I really don't, because he was a kind of a prodigy growing up, and he shouldn't have had to handle all this shit. I mean, he comes from a hockey family that played pro hockey. So, I mean, from the time he was 14, he was being looked at everywhere. He didn't have a normal childhood. When he was in a rink, everybody was kind of going to watch him play as a young player too. So you'd think he'd be able to handle it, but he just wasn't capable. Just didn't work here for some reason. And I think that he shouldn't have came to the league as quickly as he did. He could have used another year junior.
Yeah.
Just to mature and grow up a little bit. But, when you take a guy number 2 overall and you're a fledgling team at that point, like the Flyers were, it's a hard sell to ship him back.
Yeah, definitely. And Jason, just at the other end of the personality spectrum from Nolan Patrick is Cam Atkinson, who gave just like a real kick-ass interview. And he's just all energy, and he plays all over the ice. He's a shoot-first guy that checks that box. He's a really, dangerous penalty killer, and that's another box he checks. And he brings the intangible of leadership and energy in a room that needed it.
Yeah, he's I don't know if you heard my conversation with him, but he was like so infectious. I was like, geez, this dude's awesome, right? Just like energy, like pounding through the speakers. And there was where Ryan Ellis was more like stunned, like he caught a freaking forearm shimmy, right? It was just like, stunned by it. Atkinson was just like, yes, let's go, And I think the part that Atkinson knows so many guys here already. Knows Hayes, played college, was in his class with his brother Jimmy Hayes, and his wife and his family are best friends with the Hartnells. And I think that's a big thing. I always say, happy wife, happy life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Going to a new situation, one of the worries you have as an older player is my wife going to like it there? Is she going to be miserable? What's it going to be like for the kids?
His time with us, and I guess most of his career, and it was just funny because you don't realize how knowledgeable some of these peripheral players are when they're playing until they get to that point where he's got a gig with Columbus as their color guy, right?
Yeah, he's their TV analyst. I mean, he jumped right off the ice as a player and right into he initially was just going to do some studio stuff in Columbus, but their guy quit or whatever, and he ended up on the radio booth and then right over to TV in the same season. He's been doing it for 7 or 8 years now, I think. Now, a lot of times, though, I will tell you, those guys are the ones that can articulate it the best. Really good players have a hard time articulating what they do on the ice or what they see, because it's why they have a hard time coaching, because they're just instinctual. Their instincts are at a different level, so they can't explain it. And guys that have to work for everything they've gotten can explain it better. It's like that in football, too. It's like offensive linemen in football make great analysts because it's everything starts there. You know what I mean? It's just like, look at what coaches that were great players are great coaches. It's very rare, right? Like Gretzky was a shit coach because he couldn't explain why he could see every inch of the ice when he was facing one direction. I mean, I remember there was a play Gretzky made. He laid out a pass to Yari Curry in the neutral zone behind the back, and they asked him, they said, "How did you know he was there?" And he said, "I saw his reflection in the glass." Like, you got to realize, like, that's a mirror, right? Basically, everything's opposite in a mirror, and he still knew where he was going. Like, at playing the game at game speed. Like, no, you can't explain how to do that to somebody. You either can or you can't. And special players just do it. They can't explain how they do it or how they know. They just know, and that's why they don't make great coaches.
Yeah, had a little blank out there. So sorry, gentlemen. Back with you.
This is your best part of the segment.
Yeah. I hear you.
I listened to a couple of your, Flyers dailies, and since you're the goalie, and this is a questionable one, this was one of the questionable signings that you probably gave a lower grade to. But after speaking to Martin Jones, now I know like his last 3 years in San Jose haven't been great, and he's probably had a bad defense in front of him that was slowly getting plucked away to greener pastures, as in that time frame, like Braun being the first one to get out of there, and then several others, Brendan Dillon, a couple others down the line. After speaking with him and knowing the goalie coach, do you think this is a situation where he'll be able to turn it around?
I've done a lot of research on him since they acquired him. I didn't see him coming. I didn't think that was an option. I mean, obviously he got bought out the night before, so that was part of it. But, after talking to him, no. I mean, I would tell you some guys are good talkers, some guys are not great talkers. Martin is not a great talker. The fact that the interview was only 7 minutes with Martin Jones, and it was a goalie, and I kept it to 7 minutes, it tells you all you need to know. Because normally I go way longer, right? But he's not a guy that just articulates things particularly well. I didn't seem particularly interested to do so either. We'll see if I can crack the code on him and get him a little bit more comfortable. But one of the things, and I talked to Kevin Woodley a lot from In Goal Magazine, and he covers the Canucks, and Martin Jones is a British Columbia guy, and Woody's from out there in Vancouver, and he knows every goalie coach. And in talking to Kevin on the live stream and just kind of off the air, he really made some big strides last year in getting the technical elements of his game back where they need to be. But eventually, with the lack of practice time this year and his environment still being utterly disastrous, there's no other way to put it. I mean, they were first in the league in high danger chances allowed again. They've been in the bottom 3 for each of the last 4 seasons. And it just has eroded the aesthetics and the structure of his game. Because when everything's always breaking down around you, you're trying to do too much as a goalie, and then you're trying to figure out what you are. You know, am I a positional goalie? Am I a beat the pass on my skates goalie? Am I getting into desperation mode? Not enough, too soon, too often, all those things. And they all kind of broke down. Last year, he really made some strides in the beginning of the year in the right direction, and then the wheels kind of fell off again. And a lot of that, though, is a product of his environment. But is he salvageable is really the question at this point. And with Kim as the goalie coach, Kim did a lot of work with him early in his career, really set him on a path with the structure. He's going to have to rebuild that. He's going to have to work on it and get that part back. He's going to have a lot of time for practice this year. It'll be more practice time than this last year and a half or whatever it's been. And, you know, he didn't have a normal offseason either heading into last year because he was one of those teams that didn't go to the bubble and they couldn't get on the ice in Canada. So I'll kind of chalk that one up a little bit. But, you know, it's a questionable signing. There's a little bit of risk involved because, you know, if Hart gets hurt, struggles, or any of those things, you're going to have to lean on him for a period of time. And you're going to have to hope that he's a guy that can give you high-level goaltending and not sink your season if Hart's out for, you know, 2.5 weeks or 10 days and misses 4 games. So there's a lot riding on that position, but while there was a lot of options out there, there weren't great options. Bernier was the best option, but with New Jersey and the cap situation they're in, they can afford to overpay, which is why they overpaid for Hamilton and they overpaid for Bernier. No other team could go there. So, you know, in that $2 million range where they went with Martin Jones on the 1-year deal, I don't love it. I would not have gone Holtby. I thought that was a horrible idea. I think a lot of people around here were like, give me Holtby, because they remember the Holtby that won the Cup. But since Holtby won the Cup, you haven't seen that Holtby. Yeah. It was a byproduct. Big part of that was the byproduct of playing behind Barry Trotz's defensive system, which is insanely good. So that's a great environment for a goaltender. And, you know, and talking to some people too and hearing about Holtby last year, like if he's not the starter, there's a huge crisis of confidence, not a great teammate and support, you know, piece in that role for him. So that wasn't a fit. And I know some people said that the Flyers, you know, the reason why he didn't come here, I saw some reports saying he didn't come here because he didn't want to come to the East Coast. That's bullshit. That's not what I heard. They weren't interested in bringing him in here for a couple of reasons, kind of which I alluded to, that were red flags for them.
Yeah, I mean, if Ian Clark can't fix you, he's like one of the top 3 coaches in the whole league. What does that say? So.
Yeah, Clarkie's great. And it just didn't work out there in Vancouver. It wasn't a long period of time. But, I mean, look at even Holtby. Even in the year when they won the Cup, he lost the job. And then he got it back and he went on a heater and they won a Cup, you know. So, and then when Trotz left, he was a gong show. Lost the job again. So, you know, to me, he would not have been a good option. No. And I mean, look at the other guys. I mean, who are the other options out there?
Brossoit, that was probably one of the better.
Yeah. Small sample size. I like Brossoit, but the sample size is small. You know, Olmark was going to get paid too much money. They couldn't go there. That didn't make any sense for them. And, you know, so the way it played out, I think is interesting. I think the interesting thing, too, is that Bernier goes to New Jersey. And, you know, what's that role going to be for Mackenzie Blackwood?
Yeah.
I think that's an interesting one.
Yeah. But if there is a fissure in the whole edifice of what Chuck Fletcher did this offseason, it definitely is with Martin Jones. Dan?
Yeah, so, you know, Jason, we're talking about goalies. You're kind of the goalie guru. You know, all these moves this offseason are probably going to be for naught if Carter Hart can't rebound. And so I guess, you know, this is obviously the $1 million question and no one can really accurately answer it. But Carter Hart's coming off a really bad season in which he kind of started going into a tailspin, wasn't really able to come out of it. He's turning 23 years old on August 13th. So he's still very young in terms of NHL goaltender years, and it's still a lot of pressure on him. You know, have you talked to him at all recently? Where do you kind of see him coming into the season? I'm not fully confident that at the age of 23 that he's going to be able to fully rebound from what happened last year, because to me he seems like a kid who maybe has been sheltered a little bit and now he's sort of out there in the world and having to deal with real world problems. And I don't know, what are you thinking on him right now, and what are you looking at going into the season?
Well, I think a big part of it with him is going to be the environment. If the environment is based on structure and these elements of not just the defenseman, but the team, structure in the D zone, if it's much improved, then I have no reservations at all. None. Because while I get what you're saying, like when he almost feels like he has been sheltered, he also played for Team Canada. And the pressure that comes in that cooker is extremely hot temperatured, in his life. And he's been looked at, as playing for his country and World Juniors and all kinds of different stuff throughout the years. So I think that he can handle that part. And I think the mental part of his game is there. I think the keys are for him to get the structure of his game back, because he lost it last year. Again, the lack of practice time really hurts goalies. A lot of the work for goalies is not done in a regular practice. Like those drills, where it ends up being a 3-on-1 off the rush or, a 2-on-0 on the goalie, they're not really designed for goalies. They're not. There's no structure to them. So a lot of his work gets done prior to practice with Kim Dillabaugh in movements, goalie skating drills, and in technical elements of save selection and play reading. So he didn't have that last year. And then I think everything just kind of snowballed on him. If the environment was so bad, the environment the year before was not that much better with Niskanen, but he outperformed it. Last year, he did not outperform it. And it was a really, really tough environment. So I think a lot of it will depend on that to get him started on the right foot. Is there some concern? Absolutely. There always is with the position, because it just means so much to success and failure of a team. So there is a little bit of, there's obviously concern there. But as far as the mental aspects of it, that's an area where I really believe in his game. He's mature beyond his years. You're right, he's only 23. That is still young. But they're not going to shelter him. He's going to play a good amount of games. Is he going to play 60? No. I think he's going to play around 52 games this year, 48 to 52, pending health and everything else. And he's going to have to be a big part of it. But I think he's going to thrive under that pressure. I've corresponded with him a little bit here and there, not a ton this summer, kind of giving him a break. Because as you can imagine, I tend to get chatty when talking to goalies. But
no.
But I mean, he's been great with me, and he's a great guy, and it articulates the position and the stresses of it so well. I think this year it was the environment got on top of him, and some of those younger players that live by themselves, I think it did affect him. I think he was pretty clear about that, about almost like a loneliness to it, and getting in your own head. And there's no position that'll get in your own head like a goaltender. Like a pitcher, that'll get into your own head in baseball because it's the one-on-one battle. But with a goaltender, it's really hard to kind of snap the funk when you don't have any tools at your disposal to help you do it and distract you. I think he could use to loosen up his rigidity and routine a little bit, because I think sometimes that rigidity in his routine becomes too consuming. I think he could lose a couple elements of that and free himself up, play a little bit more, on game day, not have to have every minute of your day accounted for, because sometimes that can exhaust you mentally going in. We'll see if that comes, but he's on the ice already. I know he's been on the ice for about 3 weeks now, working with Dustin Schwartz, his goalie coach, back home. And I'm sure they're working on the core elements of his game to get him back to being that goaltender. When I saw him sliding in the saves last year, I was like, okay, he's messed up. He's not a guy that slides in the saves. Comes across on an east-west pass, pushing into a butterfly to make a save. He's a guy that makes that, to get to that puck, he beats that on his feet. He beats the pass on his feet, and he's there, and he's got all options at his disposal when the puck comes off the blade of the stick. And he wasn't doing that last year. And I always bring it up. I always bring up the one time against Boston where he got beat 3 times backdoor.
Yeah. And then he got beat short side.
Yeah, Marchand beats him short side because he's leaning. And it's just human nature, right? You get beat 3 times on the backdoor blocker side. Then there's a guy standing there, and there's a guy on that side of the ice, and then he just shoots it short side on you because you're leaning. And the NHL is unforgiving, but it's a concern because it means so much, but it's not one that's consuming me a whole lot, to answer your question.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah. I just wanted to double back with Cam Atkinson and his impact in terms of, you think he's going to be, obviously he's going to be a first or second line player. You know, it just seems like the Flyers have 3 shooters on the right side. I'm wondering what they're going to do with their power play, knowing that you have guys like Atkinson, Giroux, and Konechny that are really probably, like I said, their best shooters. And maybe it's time to reconfigure some things. How could they work that out? You know, knowing that the bumper traditionally has been a left-hand shot.
Well, Giroux plays the left side on the power play anyway. So on the power play, you know, that opens up his right shot to see the ice better and distribute. So that helps. I think your top power play unit for me right now, and it just kind of depends too what James is as far as a net front guy, but I could see it being Giroux, Couturier, and Atkinson. And then your second unit, you're going to have probably like Hayes, JVR, and Konechny. And you probably have a fourth forward on that first unit as well. They tend to run 4 forwards on the top unit. So maybe you put JVR in there and you use Couturier in that role of a pseudo defenseman / power play player. And then you got JVR net front. So, you know, does Wade Allison fit into the power play? I don't know now. That remains to be seen. So, you know, does Oscar fit into the power play? Probably not initially. But they got a lot of different options to do a lot of different things instead of the same static, stale kind of look that they were performing for years, because you have different personnel that's got different skills, and you have guys that are just flat-out shooters now. Like, Konechny's got a good release. He's not a great shooter. He can shoot a little bit off the rush and be deceptive coming down that, you know, if he's coming down the right side with that shot. But it's going to be interesting to see how they deploy him. I mean, who's your top power play, you know, defenseman? Is it Ryan Ellis? Probably. Is it Yandel? Well, you can make a case there too, right?
Yep.
Or do you go Yandel on the top and then Ellis and Ristolainen on the second pair, or Ellis and Sandhun? I don't know. I don't know what you do. You probably go Ellis and Sandheim, or Ristolainen and Sandheim, because you have a right-left. But I don't know. They got a lot of options. I think the days of Provorov on the power play are probably over for a little bit.
Yeah, let's have a little applause for that. If I could have an applause sound drop, I would put it in right there. But so Yandel, you spoke about Keith Yandel. He was someone you mentioned before he signed as someone who would fit nicely in there and maybe give Cam York an opportunity to get a few more games at the AHL level. Let's not rush the kids. We've done that more than enough times. And plus the intangible aspect of it.
Yeah, I mean, I just thought that made all the sense in the world, right? It was almost too obvious for so many reasons, and I think Chuck alluded to it, that a lot of teams wanted Keith Yandel. First of all, he just got bought out, so he wasn't looking for a huge payday. So that fits perfect in a flat cap world to get a guy like that. And he just makes all the sense in the world to me. You basically traded him for Shane Gostisbehere, and you're saving $3.5 million. You know, I mean, is he a great defender? No. He's a better defender than Ghost, but I don't think that many aren't. And then he's a really good power play player, like, still, right?
Yeah.
And not only that, but I think the fun elements that he brings to the team. I mean, I thought Yandel was a home run, which is why I mentioned him a couple of days before they signed him. And then somebody reached out to me like, yeah, keep an eye on that. And I was like, oh, okay. But it just made so much sense. It just makes hockey sense. It makes room sense. It makes city sense. All of it just made so much sense. And usually when everything makes so much sense, it never happens. But this time it did.
Yeah. Thank God for that. Chef?
Yeah. So, I mean, we're talking about all the overall moves altogether in the whole thing. Well, you know, when we had you on before, you had mentioned, well, they got to, you know, they need this, and going down and checking all the boxes. It seems like from a GM standpoint, if you look down, you know, they addressed every single box plus more, and they got several different boxes and several different players. So, I mean, overall, this grade for Chuck would be considerably on the high side, even with Martin Jones, you know, questionable, and we haven't even talked about Nate Thompson coming back yet either. So, I mean, I personally have no problem with it. I thought when he was here, at least he showed up when he was here, as opposed to certain other players on the team, maybe.
Yeah, I'll just talk about Nate real quick. He's going to be on tomorrow's Flyers Daily. I spoke to him on Friday. And with Nate, the rub will just become usage, right? Don't overuse Nate Thompson. And he's not going to block anybody at this point. If they have a better option to put on the third line and Nate needs to come out, he's going to come out. But he does bring a lot of those elements that you need. He brings some sandpaper. He brings the ability to kill penalties, take some key face-offs, all those things. But yeah, the point I was always trying to make was people kept saying, well, they have so many question marks, they can't possibly address them all this season. And I said, my point was that, yeah, you're right about the amount of question marks, but let's not forget it doesn't take one player to address each question mark.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes players address multiple question marks, like Ristolainen does. He brings some other question marks into the equation, oddly enough, but he was okay. Upgraded second pair, physical presence, nastiness, a guy that can play a lot of. He checks he checks multiple boxes. So does Ryan Ellis. The one box that Ellis didn't check was size, which is why Ristolainen became more of a necessity. Because if I'm going to fill that top pairing role, I do need some size still. So you add that into your second pairing. So my point was that you can check a lot of boxes really quickly. And look no further than 2 years ago when you brought Nisk. Like, they didn't make significant changes heading into that first season with AV. It was, a guy like Niskanen. And it was, a couple of other players. It wasn't significant, but when you slot people properly, it changes a lot. And I know people, when you watch the playoffs, they go, oh, my God, the Flyers are so far away. Look at how these teams are playing in the playoffs. Well, you can't compare. That's an apples to oranges comparison, regular season hockey to playoffs. So they're not nearly as far away as people thought they were, and they weren't nearly as close as people thought they were the year prior. So they were somewhere in that middle area. Are they closer now is the question. Again, on paper, to me, it looks like they are, but we don't know the answer to that until we see what this looks like on the ice.
Yeah. Dan?
Yeah, I think that looking at the boxes to be checked, there are still a couple of question marks. I think we've already talked about the backup goaltender. I think that that's still a question mark, but he did obviously had to fill that. But, one of them that's going to be interesting going into the season is what are they going to do from a 3C perspective? Because Nate Thompson is certainly not your 3C. And so that's sort of one of the question marks going in that I don't think they really did anything to address in the offseason. There's options. Maybe Morgan Frost gets a roll out of camp, but I don't think anyone wants to count on that. Maybe Giroux's the third line center. But, I think they'd prefer him at wing. Maybe totally. Lawton, but it seems like Lawton's had, 8 chances to be the third line center. So, I feel like third line center is really going to be an interesting one to take a look at and kind of see how that pans out. Because I feel like it's one that Chuck probably knows it could have, had some more attention, but he just didn't have the cap space to do it.
Yeah. And the one thing, unfortunately, we don't know is what Morgan looked like practicing prior to all this, right? Mm-hmm. He played his last game in March 12th of 2020, and then he played a game in 2 shifts this year. So we just don't know, what they know at this point. And we can't assume that, he's put on muscle or he's much better. We don't know. We just don't know the answer to that. But Chuck also has to figure out, okay, where am I going to be able to save money? Because I have to improve all these goals against categories, right? Yeah. I have to improve this D. I have to add some toughness. I have to do all these things. And, is my gamble spot on a lower paid player at 3C with Morgan Frost? And it's a gamble because I think it's so important, such an important role. I would have loved to have seen them grab Philip Deneau. Could you imagine, Danny, if they had Philip Deneau and all of a sudden Couturier didn't have to play shutdown minutes as well? What that would do for his game.
Great. He got such a big contract though.
Yeah, he did.
He got paid, man.
Yeah. And I think there's a high value for guys like that. I believe in guys like that because it's not a sexy thing to get out on the open market, but the game's cumulative. It's about It's just as much about preventing goals as it is scoring them. So, and he's so good defensively. But anyway, and of course I'm speaking from a goalie perspective. But Morgan, you're right. That's a question mark, and that's a big question mark. Is he ready to take that jump? Because to me, I can't sit there and keep going back and forth and putting Giroux in the middle. Enough already. He put him on the wing. He stays on the wing. I don't care who gets hurt. You figure something else out. Unless you're in dire straits. But to me,
they signed Yandel to kind of take some pressure off of Cam York making the team. To me, based on everything I've seen and the players' histories, I would have been more convinced about Cam York as the third pair defenseman as I am about Morgan Frost as the 3C.
I don't know if I would agree with you on that. I don't know that I could make a huge case to disagree with you, other than Morgan's played more in the NHL. Cam's played the 3 games, and Cam looked good, but I think also the position takes more tenderizing or maturing at defense than it does even at center on a third line. You know what I mean? Even if you're a third.
Yeah.
Plus, I think Cam would be better playing 18 to 22 minutes a night in the AHL than 10 to 12 minutes in the NHL, development wise. So that'd be part of the equation for me too.
Yeah, I could see that, but also keep in mind that Cam York is probably, if he stays with this franchise, is going to be behind Ivan Provorov and Travis Sandheim, for a little while anyway. So it's not like he's going to be thrust into a role where he's playing 20 minutes a night.
Yeah, you're right. There's no pathway that's just right there, right? To slam a top 4, top 2
But I guess
pairs.
on the flip side with Frost, and I'm a big fan of his. I've been a big fan of his skill set for a while. I guess the plus side is no one is really expecting him to kind of blow it out of the water. And what if he comes in and he's phenomenal and, shows off his skill and his Giroux type talent and really makes an impact on this team? There's a real chance for him to do that, and the expectations aren't really there.
Yeah, he's in an advantageous situation in that regard, right? And you look at his junior numbers, put his last 2 years in junior numbers right up next to Giroux's. They're identical.
Yeah,
right?
I did it multiple times and got absolutely hammered on Twitter for doing it. But every single thing about his path is very similar to Giroux, and his skill set. I wrote several long articles about him with many videos, just looking at some of the things he did in junior, and he sees things develop on the ice that other guys just don't see.
Yeah.
I think we saw it a little bit in some of his NHL games, but it's hard with a guy who couldn't stay healthy and took a hit that looked fairly routine last year and is all of a sudden needs, shoulder surgery. So it's can he stay healthy? And, does he have the experience needed to be in NHL 3C? So it's exciting, but it's also, a little bit scary.
Sorry, my daughter's talking.
Do you have an opinion on Morgan Frost?
Yeah, she is a Morgan Frost fan, actually.
Yeah, he seems like a really nice kid.
Yeah.
That's an exclusive on the O&B Puckcast. There you go.
Yeah, she made her debut.
We don't want to keep it too much longer. Before I get to Chef with a last question or two, I just throw a little fly in the ointment. When you talk about center position, I think it's pretty clear based on the draft pick. The Flyers had their choice with that 13th pick of either Rasmus Ristolainen or a guy I think was stolen from the Sabres, Sam Reinhart. And to my way of thinking, you can make a case that could have been a really good way to go, considering where the Flyers are at contract-wise with Sean Couturier. And it's kind of dicey coming into this year. Just any thoughts about that player's availability? Because it would have been an either-or, because that 13th pick was the main piece that the Sabres wanted.
Yeah, the market was so different for the players, which is why you saw the compensation be so varied, right?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Because Sam Reinhart's an RFA, Ristolainen's heading into UFA years. And the other part of it is that the need, right? Reinhart's a guy that I liked a lot, and I would have loved to have added to this team. It could have been your 2C going forward, move Hayes to 3, right? The whole thing that slots you differently. But I think the reason why Chuck went where he went, and there's a debate whether he should have gone Reinhart over Ristolainen. Could you have accomplished something similar in another move, right? So if you got Reinhart, could you still have accomplished what you needed to accomplish with your second pair? And that's tough. And it's, since they went Ristolainen, can they accomplish what they didn't get in Reinhart some other way? Maybe they think that's Morgan Frost based on what they've seen and what we don't know yet. I don't know. But to your point, I agree with you. He's a guy that was very intriguing to me, and that you could have pivoted the package in a way to get him and not Ristolainen. I know a lot of people wanted both. That would have been a dream scenario.
Yeah.
But the thing is you gave up 13, and in a normal year, 13 is tremendously valued. I think it was valued differently this year because we saw that draft went right.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, and this team is clearly in win now mode, but both of those players would help you win now, Reinhart and Ristolainen. But can you still accomplish as much overall team improvement and team building properly if you didn't get Ristolainen and you got Reinhart? That's what I don't know. From an offensive standpoint, clearly. But Chuck Fletcher was very transparent that everything this offseason was in an attempt to make them harder to play against and lower the goals against. So, that's a good question. I don't know the answer to it. We won't know. But, I mean, if they didn't do anything to address this lack of accountability and physicality on the ice, I think that that would have been a tough team to drag around all year.
Oh, yeah.
Especially like Ryan Reeves is in the division now. Right?
I was just going to bring that up. We could have traded for him, but do you think AV is going to dress Sam Morin some games against the Rangers, or he's not going to get sucked into that?
I don't know that he'll get sucked into that. I think he could. It just depends on how everybody's playing, where the health situation is. We're in an 82-game season, but also one that's still condensed because of this, pending Olympic break. Yeah. So it's usage and a little bit more depth that could be something that they look at and keeping guys fresh as best they can. So, yeah, I mean, Sam could get into some games.
Yeah. Chef?
My last question, I don't want to keep you too long either. So they got a little over $8 million left in the cap. How do you fare the contracts for Carter Hart and Travis Sandhun faring out with that $8 million that's left?
I think it's going to cost you about $7.25 total. So, I mean, look, both players, it's bridge deal written all over, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You're not going long term on anything. Nobody is. I mean, if Sandhun want to go to arbitration after last year?
No, probably not.
Yeah, let's get a 2-year done, both players, and we'll kick the can down the road, and just move forward. I don't think it's going to be any issue or there's going to be any kind of, long drawn out process here. I think it's pretty straightforward, and both players will move forward and they'll try and catch the life altering payday in the next one. Doesn't make any sense for them. Doesn't make any sense for the team.
No, not right now. Dan, do you have one?
No, I just left my hand up my virtual hand was still up. But
that's okay.
I'm good.
At least it wasn't the virtual finger.
Yeah, I'd never. Maybe to Isaiah might give him the virtual finger, but Jason, that to you never.
We've gone through that. Jason, man, thanks so much for stopping by. So what's your schedule? I mean, you don't have a cottage to retreat to, but you're still going to be doing some shows, some player interviews. Where can we catch up with you?
I just got a text just now from Joe Seville that Kevin Hayes and Keith Yandel were taping tomorrow at 1:30 now. And our fingers are crossed. Hazy was on the golf course on Friday. So
can't wait for that one.
Warm up your mouth before that one.
Yeah. It'll be fun. I'll just be like lobbing the ball up and you guys smack it around them. But that'll be fun. But no, Flyers Daily, Monday's episode will have Nate Thompson. I got a bunch of stuff already recorded. Sam Moran, Darryl Williams, the new Flyers assistant coach. We got a lot of great stuff in the work. Chuck Fletcher's going to be coming on AV. I'm trying to get Giroux on before baby number 2 comes on August 11th.
Wow.
And a lot going on with Flyers Daily, and we're ramping up to the season. once we get into like mid-September, I imagine we'll go back to daily once camp starts, and we'll be doing them every day. I've done like 450 episodes already. It's crazy.
Yeah.
It's a great, very enjoyable series. Thank you.
Oh, it is. Yeah. It's
no problem.
get your day off to a great start. We're 450. We're happy we did 125. Jason, thanks so much for stopping by, man.
Anytime, guys. Looking forward to hockey season. It's like the great thing about it, even like all the dissension and debate over some of the moves and everything. The cool thing about it is this, that it matters again, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And even though we're debating whether a move was good, bad, horrible, great, whatever it is, the team is relevant again. And the only way they're going to stay relevant, though, is to win and do something good. But it's back in the conscious mind of people, which is good, because last year was so hard. And you guys do a podcast on the Flyers and hockey. And I do too. And I've worked in the industry for a really long time. Like I want the team to succeed because I want the fans to get into the mix of it and enjoy it and get what they deserve out of it. And then hopefully these moves put them in that direction, and we can all move forward and have a really fun fall, winter, and right into spring and summer, and go on some kind of run. You never know. I mean, it's the one thing in this league, you never know. Like, you don't have to be. Look at Montreal. They finished the season last year 18th best record in the league, 1 point ahead of the Flyers, and they went to the Cup final. So you're never as far off as you think you are.
No, and they were built for that run. I think, you know what? The moves that Chuck made them closer to being built for a run. So,
guys, I've talked about it all offseason, that building a team for the regular season is all fun. Yeah, that's great. Be teams, 6-2. You get in the playoffs, that team gets bounced every year, doesn't it?
Yep.
You've got to be a team that can defend it in the playoffs, because every inch of the ice is defended. And building a roster that doesn't have to be a wagon in the regular season. Just get into the playoffs, get in comfortably, and then go on a run in the playoffs with good goaltending, big D, good players, and a little bit of luck.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, my man.
All
Have
right,
a good
boys.
night. Be with your family.
Be good.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Jason.
Yeah, thanks a lot, man.
Take care.
Good stuff, yeah.
It says I kicked somebody out, but I did. I always get kicked out. It says I
bully.
kicked them
You're
off.
a bully.
Yeah, well, I come from the Broad Street bully era. Hey, before we get rolling and wrap things up, I just want to tell everybody the O&B Puckcast and FlyersNittyGritty.com are brought to you by Jim South Street, 400 South Street. It's 40 years of the best cheesesteaks and hoagies in the finest Philadelphia tradition. With, without, it don't matter. If you live down near 400 South Street, but you can't make it over, no big deal. They use DoorDash to get that delicious food right to your door. So check it out. Jim South Street, 400 South Street in Philadelphia, PA. Check it out. You got to get that. All right, gents, let's give some final thoughts and wrap it up. What do you think about the off season, and maybe give it a grade? Chef, I'll start with you.
My grade, like I said, B-. I'll hang around B- right there, only because the Martin Jones thing is questionable to me. And trust me, San Jose is like my West Coast team, so I know exactly what we're getting, and it's not chock full of confidence right now. So, but overall, I really like all the moves, and who knows if he turns out to be a solid backup, a solid number 2, or 1B, have you will. I think I can end up having to change that grade to maybe an A- at the end, but I'm going to stick with my B- for now and say I'm very satisfied with everything so far.
Okay, where could people catch up with you on social media?
They can catch me at Chef to Left B on Twitter, and also another one of our sponsors, Summit Public Adjusters. If you have damage to your home from all these recent storms in this area here, well, I just want to say, hey, mention it. Tell them I sent you. You get a special signing fee. So there.
Oh, okay. We'll definitely get that in
special
there.
discount. Yep.
Okay. So, Dan, what about you?
But it feels like we've been on a roller coaster through the ringer with these moves that Chuck has made, and people were scared he wasn't going to make moves. Man, this is unbelievable so far. I'm going to give him a B+ just because I feel like it was pretty tough this offseason to get stuff done, especially with the cap. And I mean, just the moves that he pulled off. I mean, moving out Voracek and getting in Atkinson, the Ellis trade was an absolute A+.
Yeah.
You know, the Ristolainen one, we'll see how it pans out. I wasn't happy with it at the time, but maybe, you know, his snarl brings a lot. The Yandel signing's fantastic. And the Jones one's a big question mark. But I'm going to give him a B+ because he remade the locker room. He filled some needs. And, you know, like Chef said, we'll revisit it and kind of see how these guys pan out. But I think he did a lot of what we all really wanted to see him do. So now it's gonna be a little letdown here over the next month or so because the moves aren't going to be. I mean, they were coming fast and furious every day. Stuff was going on, so it's going to be a little calmer now. A lot of talk about the Carter Hart and Travis Sandhun contracts, but yeah, no, I'm pumped. I'm excited about going to see them play again. You know, I've got season tickets, and I haven't really been excited to see this team play in a while, but maybe I'll go to that season opener and you know, be excited to see some of these new guys out there.
Yeah, they matter again. I was just flipping the dial on sports talk radio, and I was hearing Flyers talk. You know, so even with the Ben Simmons trade rumors and the Phillies frustrating people like a lot like the Flyers did last year, and whatever's going on with the football team. So yeah, I think it's we had a Homer-esque offseason for the first time since really Paul Holmgren 2012ish. So that was really good. Dan, where can people find you on social?
Oh, so they can find me on Twitter at dsilver88. Throw me a follow, and we'll get in some conversations or arguments or whatever you'd like. Yep,
fantastic. I'll give the Flyers a solid B, and the only thing weighing it down from like an A or an A- is the Ristolainen gambit. I'm a little concerned about that, and also kind of took him out of play for some other moves, especially in goal. And that's the one thing. In effect, the Flyers have two reclamation projects. One is minor in Hart because a lot of young goalies stumble. The one is major with Martin Jones because he hasn't been good in 3 years. I'm hoping Kim Dillabaugh can put them back together. Like Humpty Dumpty, though, he might not be able to to do that, and which means the Flyers might be goalie shopping. But we'll see what happens. A lot of things change a lot of times, and we all know this, following the team for so long. You think one thing when the season starts, and you see how things level out. And cream rises to the top. According to Jay Fresh, as we mentioned earlier, the Flyers, the wins against replacement model has the Flyers tied with the New York Rangers in first place in the Metropolitan, which will be reformed this year. So we'll see what happens. We'll find out where Jack Eichel goes in the next couple of weeks, whether Vladimir Tarasenko is going to be with one of the New York teams, as rumored from the fourthperiod.com. Marc-Andre Fleury has agreed to go to Chicago and play for the Hawks, which I think is good for the league. And then there's a bunch of stuff, which some other news that I'd rather not really get into, which we don't know all the facts with a certain player out west. So we're going to leave it at that. You can follow me, Isaiah, ISAIAH _520 Isaiah. Don't forget the underscore 520. And of course, follow the O&B Puckcast at O&B Puck, at O&B Puck on Twitter. We're on 12 or 13 different podcast platforms, including Apple, SoundCloud, YouTube. Hit that subscribe and notification button. If you could take the time to give us a review on Apple Podcasts, we really appreciate it. If you subscribe, that really helps us out because it moves us up the charts when people are looking for Philadelphia Flyer podcasts, and we do appreciate that. We set a record last month for listens. Thank you so much, everybody, for your listenership of the O&B Puckcast. We do appreciate it. And if we get our next 5-star review, we will read it on air. So we're going to take a couple weeks off. Maybe we'll have an emergency special if the Flyers do something that we don't expect. But other than that, everybody, take care. And again, thanks you for your listenership this season.